Hey, Keith here with Rebel Civics on Unsafe Space. Today I'm going to talk about Convention of States. It's a convention for proposing amendments under Article 5 in the Constitution. The question is, will it work? By that I mean, will it work for liberty? Will it promote liberty? Will it improve the liberty? Will it fix the problems of Washington, D.C.? So I'll just give an overview of what it is and talk about three of the ongoing Convention of States movements or convention, Article 5 convention movements right now that are active in the U.S. And then I'm going to show some of the stuff I've done with Convention of States, and then I'm going to discuss some of the problems. So overview of me, I worked for Convention of States for 2 years. I hosted the Liberty Solutions podcast, which looked at current events in light of the founders' view on how things should be run in the Constitution, and concluded with how a convention for proposing amendments under Article 5 would help or could help resolve the problem that the episode was on. So that's the Liberty Solutions podcast. That was the show I had before Rebel Civics. I also wrote a lot of articles on the website, and I hosted and ran public events at music and Turning Point USA and those sorts of things. So I manned a table and an outreach. So anyway, yeah, I spent 2 years, and then full disclosure, I don't do that anymore. I'm not spending any time on that. It ended because I got fired, but that's a separate story. I got fired because I'm not Christian. It's a Christian organization, but I'm not going to get into that stuff today. I'm going to just talk about what the Convention of States is and what the three different conventions movements besides the Convention of States action. So I'm going to talk about U.S. term limits, and also there's a balanced budget amendment. Both of those are what they call single topic conventions. So first, let's start with talking about what it is. Okay, here we go. So Article 5 of the Constitution this was put in by the founders, and Article 5 covers what happens when everybody realizes that the Constitution was not perfect, and the guys who wrote it, ratified it, they knew it wasn't perfect. They spent 5 months debating it. There's a lot of things could have been better. There's some things that could have been better. Overall, it's pretty good, but there's some things that could be better, and there's also some what anybody who's rational and can read English would say is quite clear that just gets completely abused. Shall make no law, for example, is fairly clear, but apparently that doesn't mean what you might think. It means that gets interpreted as they can make any law they want now. Anyway, Article 5 is a way that the Constitution can be modified. So far it's happened 27 times that modifications have been passed and added. So a key here to remember is to modify the U.S. Constitution, only the states can do that. It's the states ratifying an amendment that makes a change part of the Constitution. Congress can propose amendments if they want. So when both houses vote, it has to be a 2/3, both have to vote 2/3, they can propose amendments. But all Congress can do is propose it. Then it goes out to the states for ratification, either by the state legislatures or by a convention. And Congress can pick which way the states ratify. But my point is, only the states can change the Constitution. And that makes sense because keep in mind that the federal government did not exist when the Constitution was written. It was formed by the ratification of it. And I'm not going to get into the previous version of the general government under the Articles of Confederation. So they operated as this far looser, less central power version called the Articles of Confederation. But the federal government we have right now was formed when the Constitution was ratified, which was a little under a year after it was released in 1788. September 17th, 1788 is when the convention released their version. 12 of the 13 states had approved it. Rhode Island didn't show up. I forget why. It went out to the states for ratification, and then that next June was when the enough states passed it. That's when New Hampshire did. New Hampshire was the one that put it over the top. So until enough states ratified, it didn't take effect. So the main point here is that it's the states that created the federal government. So all the states existed. They all had constitutions. They were sovereign states, entities before the federal government was created. So it makes no sense to think that the federal government could change the Constitution. It's their job description by the by the states who created it. So anyway, there's two ways to propose amendments. One is the way that's been done 27 times. 2/3 of both houses pass a proposed amendment, and then that goes out to the states for ratification. Second way, which I highlighted here, it's on the application of the legislatures of 2/3 of the states. They can call a convention for proposing amendments. So when a convention is called, the states all meet. They send delegates, and they take the topics that are in the call. So the way this works, the way this has to work or supposed to work, the way it should work, when the state issues a call to convention, it's a specific topic or topics. So term limits is one. That's a simple one. So the U.S. Term Limits Group, Article 5 group, they're proposing to add term limits to offices beyond the president and vice president that we have now. It's a good idea. So they have, I think, I'll show it now. I think it's 6 states, but don't quote me on that. So far, have the state legislatures have issued that call. They got to get up to 34 before the convention gets called. That's 2/3. So when the legislatures of 2/3 of the states call for a convention, then the convention gets called. It gets called by Congress. Unfortunately, they had Congress call it, but that's really Congress's only involvement, other than Congress gets to decide whether they're ratified by legislature or a convention within each state. But anyway, Congress is pretty much not involved in this on purpose. So this is states can change the Constitution, and it's in there for cases where the federal government is not going to do it. So the term limits is a good one. One of the term limits proposed under the term limits, Article 5, would be to term limit Congress. So guess how hard it is to get Congress to propose an amendment to term limit their own jobs. So there's a great example. Another one is in the Convention of States projects, 3 topics, which is basically fiscal responsibility, rein in their willy-nilly borrowing and spending like crazy. That's what the balanced budget meant. Anyway, here's the thing. So again, on application of the legislatures of 2/3 of the several states shall call a convention for proposing amendments. Convention of States is actually the name of the group, Convention of States Project. So when I say Convention of States Project, I'm talking about the group. Citizens for Self-Government is another name for them. That's in 2 different sections. I'll talk about that later. A convention of states, a lot of people use for a shorthand for a convention for proposing amendments. So I often just use convention for proposing amendments. That's what I mean. But a lot of people call that convention of states generically. But also it causes a bit of a mix-up often because people that can't or won't distinguish between the convention, and they name it Convention of States, versus a Convention of States Action, Convention of States Project, the Citizens for Self-Government business, basically, nonprofit business. So there's 2 different sections of that. One is an educational outreach, which has some tax and nonprofit status advantages. And the other one is the Convention of States Action, which is actually calling for political things to happen. So tax-wise, they're separated into 2. So anyway, when I say Convention of States, I'm going to try to be referring to the Convention of States Action, Convention of States Project group. And I'll just say Convention for Proposing Amendments. But we call the title Convention of States. So anyway, once 2/3 of the states call for the convention, then they hold the convention. They have to propose amendments on the topics it was called for. They're not allowed to, at least the process is not supposed to let them go willy-nilly and propose anything you want. They have to do it on the topic, and that's the point of the topics. And then once that's done, whatever the delegates from the states agreed to do, that gets sent out to all 50 states for ratification. So whether Congress proposed it or it was done in a convention, it doesn't matter. In both cases, it all goes out to all the states, and 3/4 have to ratify before it takes effect. And the point of this, the founders did this on purpose. This is a very high bar. That's why it's only happened 27 times so far, and the first 10 were done within a decade. What we call the Bill of Rights. There was 12, and one of them still floating out there. The 11th one passed in the 70s. That has to do with changing. It's Amendment 27 has to do with changing the when you can change the salary for congressmen. That one never passed in the original 1700s when the Bill of Rights was first proposed. But anyway, it's only happened 27 times. It's a high bar. There's been thousands of proposals. Hundreds have gone through into Congress discussions. Only 27 have made it. So anyway, that's what the thing is. So now I'll bump through some of the groups. So first one I want to talk about is the this balanced budget amendment group. So this is an Article 5. This is a group, and there's several different versions of this around, but this one's ALEC, American Legislative Exchange Council. We'll put the websites in the show notes. So they want to do a balanced budget amendment and use Article 5 to have a convention to put out the amendment. So the idea here is to mandate that Congress can't borrow money every year. They have to follow some balanced budget. Sure, like that's how everybody else has to live. Congress can print and they can borrow, and that's what they do. It's how they get away with spending trillions of dollars every year that they don't have. So the concept here is to make an amendment that forces Congress to produce a balanced budget. I happen to live in Florida, where the budgets have to be balanced. My state representative in a meeting told me that the most important job, the actually only job of a state rep and a state senators, is to pass a balanced budget. That's their number one thing. If they don't do that, then nothing else matters. So when you go to Tallahassee, that's the number one thing you have to do. That's how Florida runs. Florida is a bit better fiscally than the United States overall as far as debt goes. And all the states are better in the sense that they can't print money. Federal government just counterfeits fiat dollars every year. That's what inflation is. So anyway, that's the idea of the balanced budget campaign. A lot of people think this is a good idea. I think I'll do pros and cons on all these later. I'm just going to go through the different groups. Another one, term limits. So this is U.S. term limits. So this group, USTL, has a single subject proposal, which is congressional term limits. So their Article 5 is called a single subject, just like the balanced budget one's a single subject Article 5 group that force the add term limits to Congress. And there's several different ideas about how to do that. Generally, 2 to 3 terms kind of a thing. So say 6 years for representative and 2 for senators. So in there somewhere, 8 years, 12 years. Exactly what the numbers are is a minor thing. The idea is to not allow Nancy Pelosi and Bernie Sanders and that sort of thing. So that's what this group, U.S. term limits, right now, they've had 6 states pass their exact text as of now. They're the blue ones, the single subject text. And then there's other states, the light blue, where they've passed a variation on it that's inside other legislation. So it's not as clear. And because of the way that the convention works and how Congress has to call it, it's better with the 6 that they have here. It's better to have that because it's harder for Congress to resist it. And this is one you can believe Congress is going to fight tooth and nail about this one. So just the fact that Congress has to call the convention would if there's any doubt, like because it's not worded exactly the same, they'll claim that, Arizona, for example, never passed a resolution because their wording is slightly different. That's somewhat of the risk here, but it's bull crap. But anyway, that's the idea of the dark blue and light blue here. Then the third group I was going to talk about here, Convention of States Action. That's the one that I worked for 2 years that I talked. So this is Convention of States Action is the group. There's also a separate group under Convention of States, the business organization. That's a nonprofit, a 501(c)(3) D. I forget. It's not a C, but it's under 501(c)(3) as a nonprofit, and it's an educational organization. And I did some stuff with them too, but mostly what I did in my 2 years was with Convention of States Action, where we would do petition drives within each state to try to get states to call for a convention that haven't called yet. I also wrote a lot of articles, and I hosted a podcast called Liberty Solutions. I'll show some of the stuff that I did at the end. Where I would go through current events and talk about how Convention of States could fix it. And then I want to show the map here. Here we go. So this is the progress map for Convention of States Action. They have a 3-topic petition. I'll talk about that in a minute. But they're doing well. 19 states, I think it's up to. Somebody can count the greens that have passed the resolution. And the blue ones have active legislation, which means they're at least talking about it. Yellow is even a little better. So one chamber has passed it in the yellow states. So this could get to 34, maybe another few years. I don't know. Mark I once pushed Mark Meckler, he's the president of Convention of States, on this, and he said 5 years, but I think he was optimistic. But it's possible they've gotten a few more in the last couple of years. So once they get to 34, this one's real clear because the text is very clear in all the states except for 1 or 2 cases where they worded it slightly different. Not a good idea, but that's what they did. If they can get to 34, probably will be able to force Congress to have a convention and limit it. Their topics, let me find that written down. I'll just talk about them. So what they want to do is add term limits, like the Term Limits Amendment. They want to establish a fiscal responsibility. So that's a big one, like rein in the federal government from their fiscal problems. And then better restrict them is the third topic, is to better restrict how the federal government operates. So a couple examples of that for Convention of States Action. Like clarify what was meant by the Commerce Clause. So anybody who watches Rebel Civics or pays attention or has ever read anything the founders read, they know what they meant there. But that's a real abused one that, now interstate commerce includes growing marijuana for your own medical use in your own house. That counts as interstate commerce now, and you can put somebody in jail for that. That's that Reich case in California. The earlier case with this interstate commerce was the wheat case in the 100 years ago or whatever, where the farmer was prosecuted for growing wheat during a time when he wasn't allowed to grow wheat. Now he was growing wheat on his farm for his own animals, and they said that's interstate commerce because if he didn't grow the wheat, then he would have had to buy the wheat, and if he bought the wheat, he might have bought it from another state. So therefore, that's interstate commerce. Same with the marijuana case, which is even more interesting. I know I'm digressing slightly here, but everybody should know how corrupt and ridiculous even all the way up to the Supreme Court can be. So that case, Angel Reich, was growing marijuana, medical marijuana, in California, a state where medical marijuana is legal. So she had permission to grow it from her state. It was legal. The federal government went down on her hard for interstate commerce. Now, growing a small amount of marijuana for personal medical use, growing it inside your house or in your backyard. And again, the argument is that if she didn't grow the marijuana, she would have bought the marijuana. And if she bought the marijuana, it could have come from another state, even though California is perfectly good marijuana, but it could have come from another state, and therefore growing marijuana for your own use in your own house is interstate commerce, and Congress can regulate that. That's their argument basically for why marijuana is illegal at the federal level and still is a Schedule I drug. It's ludicrous. I know. I'm just describing it. Don't shoot the messenger. That is their argument, though. And that went all the way. That goes to the Supreme Court, and they say Supreme Court says yes, that's interstate commerce. So that's what you got from that group of politically connected lawyers. They just have a political agenda, just like everybody else. They're just lawyers who wear robes to work, and they issue opinions. I always use the word opinion. Please do that. Never say rule. Courts don't rule. That's a king's thing. Anyway, this is the Convention of States group. Again, it's the one that I worked for 2 years, and yeah, I wasn't. I'll spend 1 minute on it since this is Rebel Civics. I didn't like how they would do a Christian prayer at the beginning of all the meetings, and in my state of Florida, a new director of the state took over, and they were insisting that they were going to do a prayer, and the prayer at the end said, "In Jesus' name, I pray." And I said, "You don't speak for me." And the Florida director says, "He speaks for everyone here." I'm like, "No, you don't speak for me. If you're going to do this, you should say, 'In Jesus' name, I pray.'" That's how a real Christian does it. That eventually led to me getting fired from Convention of States. So yeah, you got to be a Christian. I mean, I knew that. They will tolerate a Jewish people if they keep mostly quiet. But yeah, it's a Christian organization. So there are people within Convention of States, a lot of them actually, that believe promoting Christianity is actually more important than the convention. So that's one of the problems with Convention of States. Again, I'm not going to spend too much time on that, but they're not openly a Christian organization. You can look through the website without realizing that, but yeah, you certainly go to an event, there'll be a Bible sitting on the table. And anyway, yeah, that's one of the problems with Convention of States. So I'm going to talk about some of the stuff that I've done. There's more problems than that just has to do with the whole scheme of a convention, which I'll get into even more. I was going to show this is the podcast I did. So and they're still all there. I own this, so I'm still paying this, so all the episodes are still there. So these are all different. There's 10 more there. I don't know how many I did, but it was over a 2-year period. I was generally doing about once a month. They're very thoroughly researched, typically about an hour audio episodes. It's on Apple Podcast and Stitcher and Google Play and the general podcast apps. There's a symbol there if you want to find it. My hat, my Constitution, you're probably familiar. I pop these up all the time. Now they say Rebel Civics on them. I buy these by the box of 50 and hand them out. And I should have wore that hat for this show. Oh, actually, I wore my Liberty Solutions hat. So this is a good place. There's a lot of stuff I talk about. Here's term limits. Actually, the term limits episode is an interview with Philip Blumel, who's the president of U.S. Term Limits, the organization that I talked about here. These guys. Oops. U.S. Term Limits. So yeah, I interviewed him on a show. Yeah, he's a good guy. That's a good show. I like that one. And he was willing to come on my show, which was actually Convention of States. I was working at Convention of States, and talk about the Balanced Budget Amendment and single topic. Yeah, I got in a lot of trouble for that one too. Luckily, I own the channel, so they couldn't shut my channel down. But yeah, it was viewed by Convention of States, a lot of Convention of States people, as being competition. So I was supporting the competition. But given that term limits is part of the Convention of States topics, and the difference is that U.S. term limits is a single subject term limits group, I saw no conflict, and neither did Philip. He supports Convention of States. The argument that he used is interesting. This is really getting subtle for you Article 5 people interested in Article 5. The argument he used is that it's easier to get a single topic convention through, and that it would be a good idea to do a single topic one And then after that, go for the Convention of States one, which is far more wider sweeping because the topics are like limit the power and scope of the federal government. That's a pretty far-ranging one. Term limits for offices other than the president and vice president. Term limits USA, super simple, easy to get people to understand. It doesn't have to, you don't have to speculate on exactly what we're talking about. It would be a convention to put term limits on Congress. It's pretty easy. That's a pretty simple one. So yeah, I like that argument. I think term limits, if you're going to do this, term limits should happen first. Anyway, income taxes, theft, Declaration of Independence. That's a good one. Here's 10 more here. Oh, Syria. This was on the Middle East wars. This was in 2018. So we were blowing up different people at the time. But that episode, it might be fun for me to go back and listen to that because I probably talked about the same stuff that I talk about Ukraine now, except it was about Syria in 2018, Middle Eastern wars. Turning Point USA Summit, talk about change the Constitution. Anyway, here's a resource if you want to know more about Convention of States and relative to current events, but it was back in 2019 and 2020 when I was doing these. The other thing I was going to do is I want to show a video. This is just to help to understand on it. So I have to remove this and stop this share. And I'm going to show you a video that I did with Mark Meckler. He's the president of Convention of States. I was when I was with him, and he still is. And I been at several events with him. This was from one it was a Turning Point USA event where I was working the table. Mark was there, a couple other people. And here we go. This is a cool video that we recorded, that I recorded with Mark. And let's see, I have to take myself out so you can hear the audio. Somebody in comments, please give me a thumbs up if you can hear it. Just let me know that you can hear it. I got to remove my.
Hey everyone, Mark Meckler here, and we are at Turning Point USA Student Action Summit 2019. It's incredible. Thousands of conservative and libertarian kids are here from all over the country, and with us we have the official Convention of States Lamborghini. And you might ask yourself, why a Lamborghini and Convention of States? Because this Lamborghini represents your share of the federal debt. That's right. You take your pick, right? Your share of the federal debt, or a 2019 Lamborghini Huracan, 0 to 60, 2.9 seconds. It's incredible. That's almost as fast as the federal government spends your money. So we're here talking to kids today. We've got them lined up. They get to take their picture inside the Lamborghini. They're signing the petition. They want to know how to take the power away from the federal government, give it back to the states and back to the people, which includes all these young people here. I'm inspired by them. I think they're inspired by all the activists out there working to take the power away from the federal government. And by the way, if you're interested in joining us, you want to do this, you can do what they're doing. You can text to 797979, text the word Lambo. You can sign the petition. You can be involved because, look, somebody's got to save the country. We want you to have the opportunity someday to earn, to own a Lamborghini like this or whatever else your dreams are. The only way we're going to do it is if we push back against the federal government. So it's not just me. It's not just all of them. It's you too. Join us at conventionofstates.com. The question facing us and facing our fellow countrymen is a two-word question. Very simply, who decides? The American founders had a simple answer. We, the people, decide.
Okay, I hope you enjoyed that. Yeah, it's a hard-hitting point. It's true. Hold on. Excuse me. Google decided to play something else afterwards. I'm glad you guys didn't have to watch that. Solar panels. One of my neighbors here. Here's a real digression. I know you see solar panels. One of my neighbors has a big sign in front of his at the sidewalk in front of his house where you walk up. It says, "No trespassing. Go away. I already have solar panels." It's a good sign. Anyway, yeah, just got yet another solar panel ad. Anyway, yeah, that video with Mark, it was at a Turning Point USA event. It was Mark's idea, pretty funny. They rented a Lamborghini and brought it to the event, and there was a lot of people there. It was Trump. It was like Trump was speaking on Sunday afternoon. He was the keynote speaker, which was fun. I had a press pass, so I got to sit. I sat about 10 feet from Trump while he made his speech and filmed him. Anyway, that at that event there was a lot of people, a lot of Turning Point USA, a lot of college age and high school age kids from all over, and we were running an event collecting petition signatures for all the different states, and basically outreach, explaining to people what it is. So I come up with this idea doing this video. That's on my Liberty Solutions Reports YouTube channel I had, which is still there. That's it's called Liberty Solutions Reports on YouTube. You can find that. That's where that video is. And that ending was my standard ending that I use for them. Mostly I was doing a podcast, but I was just starting to get into videos there. So yeah, we ran through that a couple times, and that's the video. So now I want to talk about problems. I already brought up the one about Convention of States is a Christian organization, and that clouds what they do. So my general view on that is that you shouldn't mix religion and politics. It's not a good idea. And if you're trying to pursue a freedom agenda, term limits, and reining in the power of the federal government, I don't agree with mixing in Christianity with that. Also, I'm an atheist, so I never tried to promote the Christian part. So one of the things that I was doing different from some of the other Convention of States people is that I would present principled arguments based on the founders' view as an atheist. Basically, I don't get into religion, but I would just say I want to make sure you understand that rights are inherent in being human. They don't come from the government. If people wish to argue they come from God, I generally just let it go. Not interested in that debate at the level that it was doing with Convention of States. So that's how I did it for 2 years. But yeah, they were imposing Christian values on me, which kind of led to the end of that relationship. But that wasn't really the whole thing. What was going on with me is that after 2 years, I realized that the federal government doesn't pay any attention at all right now to what the Constitution says. They'll use the words however they wish and twist and turn them if the words can be twisted and turned to suit their agenda. Example, like I brought up, Congress is allowed to regulate commerce, and what they meant by that was to keep interstate commerce regular, which is states are not allowed to limit interstate commerce. So a state can't establish a tariff on products imported between states in the U.S., for example. Like that would violate the Commerce Clause. That would prevent commerce. So that's what the founders meant. That's what that word means. So you have to read the Constitution in the words that the founders used when they wrote it. So by regulate interstate commerce, they meant that Congress had the power to keep it regular. That's what it means. Today, it means anytime anybody drives across the border. If I bring 3 hats to Georgia, I'm probably committing interstate commerce, and give one to my cousin. That's probably interstate commerce, and Congress thinks they can regulate that. That's not what they meant. So the Convention of States idea on that one would be to clarify what interstate commerce is, because the founders didn't define it in the Constitution. The problem with that as a solution to this problem is that all the way up to the Supreme Court, and certainly nearly all members of Congress, will twist whatever those words are to mean whatever they want them to mean. And changing the words, therefore, doesn't fix the problem. So I no longer see how this is going to help. I don't object to people working on it, and I know lots of people that still are. That's not my point. I support reining in the federal government by any method possible. 4 years ago, 5 years ago, I thought this was a great idea. Thought it was the best thing I'd ever heard of when I first thought of it. And it is a lot better than voting. for a new guy in Congress or White House. It's a better thing to do than that. It's a state standing up. So I support having a convention and changing it. That's fine. I support nullification. I support secession. I mean, I think it's up to the states if we want to get liberty. I just don't think that changing the words on a piece of paper that is not paid much attention to now is going to fix the problem. So the tagline that they use for Convention of States action, they call it the solution as big as the problem, which always amused me, even when I was running events and doing well at that. I had the second highest petition count in the U.S. twice for monthly count, once from events and once from writing on Quora. Actually, I spent about 6 months building up a Quora audience, arguing about why we needed Convention of States and getting signatures through that. And there was a tagline when you posted, they could track where the petition signatures on the website came from. And I had the second highest monthly total that way. The other way I had the second highest monthly petition total was I was running public events with getting a few people together and renting a space at a booth. Like I did one of them, I did it at a music thing. So a lot of the Convention of States people would say they would go to a Trump campaign event or something, and they would have outreach there, and that does work, but that's a saturated audience in South Florida. And so I did one at a rap music event, and got a lot of signatures. It's people that they don't like the government. They don't like the government at all. So you have to learn how to explain it to them, how to sell it in 2 sentences to somebody like that. A city rap fan is different from how you would sell it to, say, a MAGA person. But it is actually the same point. And if you go walk around the city, they're not happy about the government either. So anyway, that's how I did the. So I do know a lot about the Convention of States. It's often fun to debate it. I get this a lot. I start talking about how I want to fix things, and the response I get is, Convention of States will do that, fix this. And I'll ask people how. So I get into this debate occasionally on social media and in person with people. And usually what happens is I actually know more about it than they do. So often, not always, but so I can understand their arguments already. So and they usually won't even listen to mine. So I think that the overall problem here that all of these face is the doing anything detailed isn't going to work because they'll twist the words. Now, the simple one, the term limits, that's clear. So if you add that, limit Congress to 3 terms and the Senate to 2 terms, something along that lines. Limit the House to 3. That's not a word you can twist. That would just end. Now, the question then becomes, say you kick out Thomas Massey, Rand Paul, Mike Lee, Justin Amash, even like I don't want to kick them out if they still want to go, but I would like to kick out Nancy Pelosi, Bernie Sanders. So the problem with the term limits idea, even though I think it is actually a good idea and I'm fine with it, I think it's a good idea that presidents have term limits. So sure, for Congress. I also think they should do it for Supreme Court justices for the same reasons, and probably for big director place. But the problem is that it's a blanket rule where what are you going to do? You're going to just kick out everybody and that'll make it better? Maybe a little better. It doesn't fix the problem of Washington, D.C. But again, I support that one. Yeah, go for it. But I'm not going to spend any time doing it other than I just promoted it here. So people, all the naysayers that probably will be attacking me for this, I think you have to go back and watch the beginning again. I just promoted all 3 of these things, really. That's how I look at what I did, even though I pointed out some problems with them. I'm showing people their links. I'm sure some people will watch this show and go to the links and sign their petitions. I'm fine with that. Again, I'm good with reining in the federal government, however it can. The balanced budget amendment problem, I haven't talked about that one yet. Okay, that's a cool idea conceptually, balancing the budget. But it doesn't say anything about how big the budget is. So the problem with spending and the problem with borrowing and printing money comes from how much money they spend. So just limiting them to a balanced budget, probably all that'll do is they'll raise taxes. Now maybe it'll slow them down a little because they got to actually tax the people that are adults now and working, instead of what they do now, which is they tax people that aren't born yet or haven't gotten to be old enough to vote. So, always keep in mind when you think it's great the federal government spends an extra $1 trillion that they didn't take in stolen tax money this year, and whatever other revenues they get, tariffs and that sort of thing. They spend an extra $1 trillion. That's a tax, and it's a tax. It's a bit of a hidden tax, so it's a lot of people don't recognize it, but it's still a tax. It's just that it's a tax on people who aren't old enough to vote, aren't working yet, aren't born yet. And it's also a tax on anybody who's got money saved because it devalues the dollar. When they print, it devalues the current dollars. The printed money, they invent $500 million for quantitative easing and the whole Federal Reserve scam. That's a scam. I'm using that word on purpose. They're taxing the money itself, really. So everybody pays that tax eventually, but the first dollars they print that they hand out to the major banks, the federal banks, and major contractors get a chunk of that. They're using the dollars, the newly printed dollars, at today's value before this print settles in inflating the money supply and expanding the money supply, which causes inflation. It reduces the value of each dollar. So when they print $1 trillion, you can figure out what the inflation is, but you just look at however many dollars there are in circulation. They just added $1 trillion to them without doing anything. So it's the same goods and services being chased by another $1 trillion. It's just a math thing. You just divide it out and you say, okay, they just devalue the dollar by this much. What happens is it takes a few years to take effect. So, the record so far right now, Biden might break it, especially if he gets a nuclear war started. But Trump's got the record right now for the biggest budget ever and the biggest borrowing. I remember him bragging about the $1 trillion biggest budget ever. You think that's a Republican and Republicans are going to fix your problem? Nah. Republicans passed the biggest federal budget ever, which is the biggest borrowing. If you understand what borrowing and printing is as a tax, you'll recognize that Trump is the biggest tax and spend president in U.S. history so far. And I'm not promoting Biden by any stretch of the imagination. Biden might beat him, especially if he manages to get a nuclear war going with China or Russia. He'll probably be able to beat Trump. But right now, he might not be able to. Trump really set a high bar there on printing and borrowing money. So anyway, the problem with the balanced budget amendment, let me circle back to that, is that if you force Congress to balance the budget, but don't force them to slow down their spending, I see it as likely that they'll just tax more. And maybe it'll slow them down a little. And so it would be cool if they're slowed down a little bit. It would make the conversation more open because they would be forced to talk about where they get their money from. So in that sense, maybe it could help a little bit, but I suspect all they'll do is just collect more money from the working people, which is better than collecting it from people that aren't born yet. But you can't, I don't see how that can fix DC. DC is so out of control right now. So I don't see that as being the fix. So the answer to my question, as I said, will convention of states work? Nah, my answer is no. Not for what the problems that I see, not for what I see DC is doing right now to us. I think we have to give up on DC and walk away. So bottom line, my answer is no. So Yeah, leave in the comments. I'll go back and look at the comments after a day or so on some of the major apps. We're out on Rumble and YouTube, and just see what people think. So yeah, let me know. It's kind of a yes or no question. Will convention of states work for liberty? Will it produce liberty? Will it rein in the federal government back to where you want it to be? Where I want it to be is where the founders did it. So you call me a Jeffersonian on this question. No, convention of states is not going to put the federal government back to the one that the founders envisioned. I can say that for sure. Maybe it'll help a little, but the concept that it's the solution as big as the problem, that just makes me laugh. I never believed that. Never believed that from the first day I heard it. Like, this is not the solution as big as this problem. We need a far bigger solution than this one. So anyway, there's your Convention of States episode. So I'll see you next week on Rebel Civics. Thanks for watching.
This production was made possible through the generous support of our members. To join our community, visit unsafespace.com. Unsafe Space is an online publication for individualists interested in subverting authoritarianism and ushering in the next Enlightenment. For biting analysis and nourishing composition, or to sign up for our weekly news brief, The Abstract, visit unsafespace.com. Thanks for joining us today.
Warning. This is an unsafe space. Dangerous ideas have been detected. The content of this production has not been authorized for distribution on Apple devices. The following co-conspirators are hereby uninvited to Klaus Schwab's Winter Solstice Party. Please be advised that CBS News has paused activity on Unsafe Space while it continues to assess security. Central bank digital currency is a safe and secure way to protect you from Sam Bankman-Fried. If you think about it, no one should be allowed to express opinions. But don't. Think about it, I mean. That's not your job. Thinking has been scientifically proven to be less efficient than compliance. Science, scientific, and scientifically are registered trademarks of the World Economic Forum. Unauthorized use is prohibited. Computer voice courtesy. Never mind, that last line is misinformation. Please disregard it and return to your safe space immediately. There will be cake.